And I'm now going to pass the microphone to ARARA President Ann Briarty, who will say a few words about ARARA and introduce today's speaker.
Hello. Welcome to ARARA's online event. I'm Ann Briarty, President of ARARA, American Rock Art Research Association. It's a diverse community of members with wide-ranging interests who are dedicated to rock art preservation, research, and education in order to communicate to a broad audience the significance of rock art as a non-renewable resource of enduring cultural value and important expression of our shared cultural heritage. We encourage and we welcome you to join ARARA as a member and or renew your membership. ARARA is a nonprofit organization. Volunteers keep us together. They're the binding. We also have a variety of committee positions open, and we look forward to our membership filling these positions. Let's turn our attention now to our guest lecturer, Jon Harman. Has had a 30-year career in medical imaging. This included working as a senior scientist at Imagery, the manufacturer of the fastest CT scanner in the world. While at Imagery, he received patents at several aspects of CT reconstruction algorithms. At Imagery and subsequent companies, he worked on development of portable CT scanners and airport CT. He holds a patent on the original airport CT threat detection system. He later helped develop the size optical coherence tomography OCT system for ophthalmology. For 40 years, he has interest in rock art, the paintings, the petroglyphs of indigenous peoples. In 2005, he created DStretch, a rock art enhancement program. DStretch has become the premier software tool worldwide for archaeologists and amateurs desiring to enhance faint rock art. There's a version for Macs, PCs, and Linux. There are also apps available for iOS and Androids. In 2007, he was invited by Enon archaeologist Maria Gutierrez to visit sites in the Sierra de Guadalupe and Baja California Sur. He visited dozens of remote great mural art sites and documented them using DStretch. At many sites, there was no vehicle access and mules were used to travel in the difficult Baja backcountry. The great mural rock art of Baja California is one of the world's greatest rock art traditions. He has written papers about the sites he has visited and has developed a theory that explains the development and spread of great mural art. He is a member of the Bay Area Rock Art, ARARA, and the national group ARARA. You can find DStretch on the website www.dstretch.com. At that site can be found DStretch help, tutorials, the slides to his many presentations, PDFs of his papers, slideshows on significant sites, and latest DStretch news. Let's welcome Jon Harman. Take it away, Jon.
Okay, thank you very much, Ann. Okay, I hope you're seeing my PowerPoint.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, I got to click on it though. Come on. All right, there we are. So thank you, Ann and Peter and ARARA for giving me the opportunity to talk about DStretch. I'm going to give a sort of tutorial on how to use DStretch. Now, I claim that DStretch is so simple to use that you really don't need a tutorial, but I'll try and show you how I use it and show you a few of the more sophisticated features that DStretch has. Now, for images that I'm going to use to demonstrate DStretch, I'm going to use pictures that I took on a trip to Bolivia. This was the year that CIARB hosted IFRAU at La Paz, Bolivia. And a number of ARARA members who are on this call today went to Bolivia. And it is quite an amazing place. The rock art is fantastic. And I think it will be great to demonstrate DStretch. So Anne has already told you about my background, medical imaging. By being interested in medical imaging, I learned about Imagery, which is created by the National Institute of Health. And it's really for biomedical researchers. And it contains lots of different functionality for manipulating images. And it's easy to write a plugin for because it uses Java and it has a huge library of imaging functions. So I should say a little bit about taking good pictures for DStretch. And I say that despite the fact that I myself am a mediocre photographer at best. But and I say that fully cognizant that there are many ARARA members who are much better photographers than I am, who've been to Bolivia and probably have fantastic images of the sites that I'm going to show you. At any rate, to take good pictures, use a good camera with a good lens. Use the lowest ISO. If you're saving images as JPEGs, use the highest quality JPEG that you can. It's better to save raw data and then convert that into a TIFF, for instance. Light is essential. If it's not very bright, then DStretch will have a problem with noise in the images. DStretch is an enhancement, and that will enhance noise as well as colors. So, and those DStretch apps, DStretch and DStretch, can be very useful in the field. Even if you have a much better camera with you, by using your phone, you can take a picture, enhance it, and then see what's really there so that you can frame your image perfectly for whatever picture you're taking. All right, so as I said, DStretch is a plugin to Imagery. Now this shows you the Imagery interface. It appears as a little tiny rectangle in some part of your screen. Doesn't take up much screen territory. DStretch, once it's been installed as a plugin, then will appear in the plugins menu, and you can choose all the DStretch enhancements from there. Or if you have the startup macros.txt, and you put that into the macros folder of Imagery, then you'll get these icons. And those icons are things that I've added so that I can just hit one of those icons to do the DStretch that I want to do. All right, so here's a long list of enhancements that DStretch has. It has tons of them, but it's much easier to deal with them than this slide would make it seem. the interface is such that you simply try out the different enhancements until you get what you want. Finally, and I'm going to use this, I like to go through my photos in a browser and just sort of scroll through all the photos. And I use as a browser this thing called EarFunView. Excellent program. And I can, but there are other programs like it. There are programs like Preview on Apple and various other programs on both Macs and PCs. And one great thing about EarFunView is that I can set DStretch as an external editor. So I can just hit Shift E and DStretch will be opened on the image that I'm looking at. It's very, very nice, and I'm going to use it in this talk a lot. There is something called expert mode in DStretch. That's the original interface that I created for DStretch. It has a bunch of things that are useful, and I'm going to give you an example of many of the expert mode things that are available. Okay, so that's the end of the PowerPoint. And now I'm going to start browsing through my pictures. I don't even need to do that. Oh, here is it. Just a moment. I need to get this. Okay. So these are my pictures from the Bolivia trip in 2012. There is incredible rock art in Bolivia, including this boulder with cupules and bedrock mortars. Beautiful, incredible, beautiful, incredible landscapes, mountainous landscapes. And these are our guides, Lilo and Carlos Methfessel, and that's Sheila in the middle there. And we are looking at some Bolivian rock art. And we come to this very faintly painted rock. So I'm going to use this as my first example. Oops, let's go back. I'm going to use the editor feature of EarFunView, which opens up Image and DStretch on the image that I'm looking at. Now, so here's the image. This is the DStretch interface. It's got something called the scale, which governs sort of the strength of the enhancement. All of these orange buttons are enhancements. And let's try some out. Well, this is one of my most common enhancements, LDS. It's kind of a general purpose one. And here it's not doing quite so well on the paint, but we can see that there was a lot more there than was apparent in the original image. But this is in red, so let's try some different red enhancements. There's one, YRD. Here's another, YRE. Here's a third, LRE. And here's a fourth, CRGB. each of these enhances the red pigments. Now, it's a little hard to choose which is the best one to use here. One thing that I have found useful is to create a grayscale image from this. Then I can look at the different enhancements, LRE, YRD, not as good. YRE, well, that's pretty good. LRE, I would say, just playing with this, let's see, what about CRGB? Nah, YRE, I think, takes the cake. So, and what is this we're seeing here? Well, it's a very interesting creature. It's got like a Superman symbol on his belly. Well, if it's a belly, maybe this is a head. Well, these are seemingly two arms. So this is a very complex image, and you really need some sort of enhancement to be able to see it. Yeah, Sheila is telling me that I'm in some sort of a weird pen mode, and I'm sorry about that. I don't know how to stop that. Okay, more Bolivia. There's a little, that blue squiggle is due to pen mode. And here's the petroglyph. Here's a good example of a petroglyph that DStretch does pretty well on. And it does well on it because there's a contrast between the pecking and the patina, or the surface of the rock. So let's again take a look at it. Sorry. And because the rock is red, let's use a red enhancement. That's pretty good. Oh, I like the colors of that better. And notice that that figure really comes to life. It's a stag with a, I don't know, ladybug-like back here with spots. It's got a spear sticking out of it. You can't quite see it, but this is a rack of antlers that is attached. However, there's some lichen that is obscuring this part of the antlers. But all in all, let's look at the original image. You can't see much in the original image at all, but DStretch helps a great deal on this petroglyph. More petroglyphs. Let's just quickly enhance those. I'll use the same thing. Yeah, makes them much more clear, much easier to see what is going on. We'll continue on. This is a very interesting rock that we saw. I just threw this in here because it looks like people recognized a creature originally in this rock, and then they modified it to make the resemblance even stronger. Really a beautiful, spectacular place. That's amazing. Now we're going to come to the site called Kolpana. There is a bunch of red pictographs here. And we can use DStretch to enhance that. And of course, we're going to use the things for red. There's that, YRE. Which one are we going to choose? Well, once again, I would go with grayscale. Which one looks better in grayscale? That doesn't look so good. That looks pretty good. That's also good. Not quite as contrasty, but I can change the scale and redo that and get a more contrasty image. So I would choose YRE for this particular site. Another part of the site, and I'll show you what the LDS enhancement is useful for. If you use, say, we know that the pigment at this site is all red, but notice that if we use LDS, you can see there's a difference in pigment between this creature on the left and this painting on the right. They were probably made with different pigments, possibly at different times. And LDS is particularly good at emphasizing the differences in subtle differences in shades of red. Whereas a red enhancement won't, it's interested in making the reds as bright as possible and not in differentiating. Okay. We will continue. This is a pretty cool pictograph, and I will use a red enhancement and fix it. But then this color fix button, I should explain, is something that takes the image and makes it a little less saturated. I had a lot of feedback that DStretch colors are sometimes awfully wild. So this button is my attempt at toning down just a little bit, toning down the wild colors that DStretch can produce. And LRE, for instance, benefits from that. CRGB benefits from that. YRD a little bit. But in this case, I think it works well with LRE. So what I'm going to do, though, is show you an use of the hue mask panel. So I just went in. Let's go back to the main. This is the original DStretch. I'm going to expert mode now. And this red button here, hue mask panel, I'm going to use that. Now, there are a lot of buttons here, but all you really need to focus on is this slider. As I move the slider, it's choosing different hues. And I can move it until it's sort of covering the hue variation that's in the DStretch image. Then I can take that, and it's separating that out from the rest of the picture. I can clean that up because you can see it's got a lot of noise and other things. Okay, I'll keep that. It's cleaned now. And I can add it to the original image. So there we are. I've now taken the DStretch enhancement, looking only at the colors that are in the pictograph, extracting those out, and then putting that back into the original photo. That is the hue mask panel. Another panel at the same site. I just want to show this because I really like what it reveals, what DStretch reveals. And we'll use our LRE. Look at that. This creature was not so easy to see, and yet it's quite an amazing creature. There's a maybe a dog or a mountain lion or something down below, and other beautiful geometric forms, or maybe they're animal forms. At any rate, very cool. Beautiful rock art in Bolivia. Oh, sorry. That was the overview. I was gonna show you here. We'll do it on this one. Yeah, what an amazing panel. I wonder if maybe some people who know more than I do about Bolivian rock art can tell me what this creature really is. Is it a centipede or something, or is it something besides an insect? All right. Okay. Lots of archaeological sites in Bolivia. This looks like a walled enclosure. This may have been an Inca road. And here we come to Ulupicus. And this is a great site because it's got some tremendous rock art, very sophisticated, using many different colors. Here's a blow up of that. And I'm going to do a couple of things with this. Here we are. Let's try this. The LBK and YBK are intended for black pigments. You can see that they do a pretty good job on bringing out the black pigments, but also the other pigments too. LDS, for instance, doesn't bring out the blacks quite as much. YRD doesn't do well at all because it focuses on the reds. That's not a bad thing to do if you want to show this is the red. YYE enhances yellows. Here in the dark dots here are yellow, and help, but yellow is such a light color that turning it into this darker color helps you to see where it's been applied on this image. Now we're going to go on to this guy. He's a very cool pictograph that covers the entire top of the site. What I'm going to do is open up DStretch, and now I want to compare. And so I've opened up DStretch, and I'm going to now use DStretch Run, which opens up a second DStretch window. And so that's very useful. I can use the two windows to compare DStretch enhancements. So this guy's white, so let's try LWE. That helps. It makes him much more prominent, but you can see that I probably used the flash inside of here, and there is illumination fall off on the two ends of the picture, on the left and the right edges of the picture. You can help to eliminate that by using the flat button. It's called flattening an image. I'm going to flatten it. And now I'm going to do the same enhancement. And you can see that it is different. This is more consistent lighting. And I think it helps you to see, especially the head of the anthro, a lot better. The feet too. So that is flatten, this flat button down here. What it does is it evens out the illumination in the image. DStretch. What? Oh, I'm pointing to it right now. Sheila is telling me that I'm not showing you where the flat button is. Okay, trying to show you. There's the flat button. Right there. I'm pointing to it. You can do both before and after, but you can see that doing the flat button first gives you a better image generally than using the flat button second after the enhancement. What's this right there?
What's it say? Flat. Okay.
Okay, so moving on. Here we have some yellow. Well, DStretch does great on yellow. Now, yellow paint, in my experience, is often the first paint to fade. It's often not very bright anyways. So yellow is a very difficult problem for pictograph enhancement. This YYE is for yellows. You'll notice that it makes it darker, but that helps you to see what is there. If I used LDS, well, then it keeps it, looks like 20 is a little bit too high. See that? I'm going to make it a little bit less. Yeah, that helps. Could maybe even do it down to 10 here. So I'm changing the scale. So LDS works beautifully on yellow, but it can sometimes be better to use YYE. And yet some of the other enhancements can actually work pretty good on yellow also. And the great thing about DStretch is that it's so easy to try it out and see what you get for each of the different enhancements. Oh, this is for Amy Marymore. There was a certain amount, not a huge amount, but a certain amount of green or bluish pigment in Bolivia. And Amy, of course, is famous for her study of the green pigment in Newberry Cave in the Mojave Desert. So let's take this. I think LDS will do a good job of letting us see the pigment. I actually created some enhancements that were trying to make sort of do the same thing with green pigment that DStretch, that YYE does with yellow pigment, and make it darker and easier to see. If I go into more, here's a LBL is a blue-black pigment enhancer, and YBL is also. So that helps you to see the pigment that's in the center here. More greenish or bluish pigment. And here's another site. Truly amazing. And let's look at this close up. And I can use LDS. And, oh, wow, there's a lot more there than you can see with the naked eye. What's true, it looks like, is that there's some darkish pigment, black pigment maybe, that is hard to see. And if I use LBK or YBK, especially, I think we can increase the scale. Let's do that. LBK, that looks better. And YBK. So we can see now this interesting symbol done in black. We can see that the dots, which seemed like they were all by themselves, are actually on top of a black background. All right. This is an amazing site, Salamanca. It's got lots of yellow in it. So let's look at this. This portion of the ceiling, and it's yellow. So, wow, look at that. So that's quite amazing what it can do. These handprints, here's LDS. It's quite an amazing cave. Let's see, I've got a bunch. Let's go with this. Got a bunch of these images, all of them doing the, all of a sudden things just pop out at you that you didn't see before. I think that's what's so amazing about this enhancement. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop and show you one final thing that DStretch can do, and that is batch mode. So I'm going to bring up Image J. And Image J has these icons. I'm going to choose this one, DStretch Batch. Okay, I'm going to choose an input directory, Sarah Concha. And then output directory, I'll make it the same, Sarah Concha. And I'm going to choose, because I know that this site has a lot of red in it, I'm going to choose LRE. Or actually, no, let's use YRD. That's a good one for this site. I'm going to hit OK. And now DStretch, you see 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's already done all the images in the file. And so now if we go to that file, I can browse, excuse me, through the different enhancements. And if I see something, well, that's not appropriate, so get rid of that. What a beautiful landscape, but we're not interested in enhancing it. Get rid of that. Interesting sign. This site was a sort of a demonstration site that CARB did in order to protect it from vandals. Oops, get rid of that. What an interesting figure. So now we're at the site. We're looking at various parts of the site, seeing what the batch has done. It's applied one enhancement, YRD, to all the photos in this folder. By the way, for those who've been to Baja California, isn't this so similar to what you will see in many of the great mural sites? Colored on one side, not colored on the other, with an interesting headdress and interesting arms. So similar. So that's a demonstration of DStretch batch. Oh, and now note that my enhancement for this batch was a red enhancement. Now I'm going to open up that same image and do LDS so I can see the interesting yellow snake there. And in fact, I realized that I have another, oops. Oh, here's another example. The red didn't do very well on this. That's the one I tried, and that doesn't show it. But LDS does quite well here and shows you the, I don't know, people dancing. Very similar to sand rock art, for instance, for George and George Stoll. All right, so that's my talk. I hope I've given you some good examples of what DStretch can do with rock art. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Well, Jon, thanks very much. I'm sure even a lot of us who have used DStretch haven't used it to that extent. And I think we all picked up some new tricks from you from that and are appreciative. And it was just fun seeing all those things come into view that were nearly.
Yeah, the rock art is just fantastic in Bolivia. I can't praise it enough. It's quite amazing. And the connections that I see between that rock art and rock art that is elsewhere in the world is so striking. You know, not only does it have, cupules like Donna Gillette has studied here in California, but it has interesting groupings of animals into little herds. And we've got some of those in Nevada and elsewhere. And so, yeah, Bolivia has just got tremendous rock art.
Yeah. Well, okay, Hal, you ready for some questions?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, because we've got a bunch of them in the chat here. So first one is asking about a little more explanation of what Image does.
Oh, okay. Well, so it was developed by NIH. It was first called Image, and it was probably written in some Mac kind of language. But then it was changed to use Java. So Image is the Java version of the image program. It was developed for medical researchers, mainly biomedical researchers. You know, those guys who have cells and they are staining them different colors. You can use Image to count the number of cells in your image. It can do various dilations and erosions, which can deal with black and white images, thresholded images. Image has got a ton of stuff in there.
Okay. So here's a practical question for you. The question is, do I need a separate license for iOS and Android? Person says, I paid for DStretch several years ago and have it installed on my Android phone, but I get error messages telling me that I don't have access. What to do?
Okay, well, I don't know what your error message is. It may be telling you that you don't have a license. If that's the case, then you should uninstall it. Now, one thing is that in the many years ago, I gave it away to a few people. If you're one of those people, it's not going to work anymore because now it's a program that you have to pay for. And you get it for Android in the Google Play Store. And for iOS, and it's called DStretch. And in iOS, you get it from the Apple App Store, and it's called DStretch.
Okay.
So once you pay for it, it should work on your Android device.
Okay, so if someone has both, let's say, a Mac and an Android phone or something like that, does the same license work for both?
No, because it's completely different stores. Google is not going to do Apple a favor and vice versa.
Yeah. All right. Just to clarify. All right. There was a question here. It says, how do you get that grayscale?
Oh, that was the one button called COLADJ, adjust the colors. And that's the button you need to press. It's right there on the main screen.
Okay. Let's see what else we have. Well, okay, so someone asks, it works on pictographs, right? Not petroglyphs, but as you explain, it can sometimes be used on petroglyphs, and I think you may have demonstrated a couple of those cases.
Yeah, I found it to work pretty well. All you need to do is have that difference in color between the pect area and the surface, the patina of the surface of the rock.
Okay, so here's an interesting technical question. Someone says, I am confused with the Imagery and Irfan View interface. I've used Irfan View extensively, but have no idea how to interlace it with DStretch. Also, it sounds as if you need Imagery to run DStretch. I think that's true, right? Isn't DStretch a standalone program?
DStretch is a plugin for Imagery. It does not stand alone. Okay, well, what I do in Irfan View, and you can do this in a number of different browsers like Irfan View. There's Preview, Light. What is that one? Adobe has something that you can use. You set it up as a external editor. If you go through all the menus of Irfan View, you'll find somewhere that you can set an external editor. And what you do then is into that external editor thing, you give a little command line that will start Imagery with DStretch.
Okay, here's an interesting question. Is it possible to overlay two enhancements, say a yellow and a red?
Yeah, if you noticed when I did, well, okay, if you noticed when I did that hue mask example, that was that round red pictograph from Kolpana. I went into the hue mask panel, which is a sub panel of expert mode. And when I was done with hue masking and with cleaning, then I hit the button that said HM out. It's the output of hue mask. And I added that into the original picture. Now you could go back and do a different enhancement, say to enhance yellows, go back into the hue mask panel and mask out that yellow part of the enhancement, and then add that to hue mask out. And then you will see both the red enhancement and the yellow enhancement both placed on the original image. So that's one way to do that. There is another way to do that. You can use Image has something called image arithmetic. And you can take two different images. Let's say you have one DStretch panel and you use a red enhancement on it. And let's suppose you have open at the same time another DStretch on the same image, and you use a yellow enhancement on it. Then you can combine those two images using the image arithmetic in Image. Sometimes you can get good results doing that.
Good. Okay. Hopefully that answers the question. If someone is still wants more detail on that, let me know in the chat, and maybe we can convince Jon to actually do a demo of that again.
Yeah. Well, if I can get it to work, that doesn't always work, and I've tried it on numerous different rock art sites, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. One thing that you can choose is the minimum of the two images, and sometimes that works pretty well, rather than just averaging them together, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's a really technical one, at least for you. So some pigments have more contrast in the infrared and reflected UV and UV induced visible fluorescence than visible range. Have you tried DStretch on images captured using the infrared and ultraviolet wavelengths?
Well, I have a little bit, but I haven't noticed a huge improvement. DStretch works pretty well on its own. And yeah, I have seen some spectacular results with infrared or ultraviolet, but I'm a DStretch guy.
Okay. How do you undo one enhancement before moving on to experiment with another enhancement?
Well, you just hit a different button and it will replace the previous button with the new button. And that's what I did a number of times. You see, I chose one red, and then I hit another different red, YRE, for instance, or then LRE. They each gave a slightly different enhancement. What's going on there is DStretch knows that you don't want to do an enhancement of an enhancement. That seldom works very well. So if you hit another enhancement button, it throws away the old enhancement and gives you the new one.
Yeah. So here's a question: whether you ever do any like post-processing in Photoshop, for example, using replace color after DStretch.
Oh no, Photoshop. No, never Photoshop. Well, I know there are many people in ARARA who are truly experts with Photoshop, but Image and DStretch give me all the tools that I need.
Okay. Here's another one. Does the camera version use a standalone version of DStretch, or is it Image that is ported in DStretch running through that?
Well, what do you mean by the camera version? The version that is on iPhones and Android devices, they kind of interface with the camera on the device, and you can take a picture in the DStretch app and have it enhanced. So yeah, maybe that's not quite the question, but I have to admit that years ago, I created DStretch that lived on consumer cameras, certain Canon cameras. But I haven't worked on that for many years, and that's sort of fallen by the wayside. It was too hard to keep up with the new versions of Canon would change its camera every year or so, and it took me a year to get it ported on there. So that was ridiculous. It was too much work.
Right. Somebody asked they had downloaded DStretch about 4 years ago, and are there updates since then?
Probably since 4 years ago, there might be an update. And
Yeah.
if you are a paying owner of DStretch, to get DStretch, you go onto the website and you hit the donate button, and you have to donate $50. Many years ago, I didn't require that. But if you want to upgrade your DStretch, then you're going to have to make another donation. If you haven't, once you make a donation, I will send you the latest version automatically.
Yeah. Okay. So, you want to give the URL for that?
DStretch.com. It's very
There you
easy
go.
to remember. That's a DStretch.com.
Okay. Great. So, a question here: does the image manipulation done by the iPhone camera interfere with DStretch?
Oh, iPhones take pretty good pictures, and no, my experience with iPhones, I don't have the latest one. I can't afford to keep on buying these new iPhones or Android devices, so I don't have the latest ones. But usually, the Apple camera is excellent. It's much better than many of the Android cameras. However, Google Pixel has got pretty good cameras too.
Okay. Here's an interesting idea. Is it worthwhile to save an image with one enhancement and then run that image through another enhancement?
No, not usually. I don't do enhancements of enhancements.
Okay.
I haven't found it useful.
All right. Okay, so here's a comment that it says, "Hi, you might want to mention that the computer version, the ImageJ plugin, is different and more complex than the phone tablet versions, which don't require ImageJ."
Right. The phone versions have I call it a lightweight version of DStretch for a couple reasons. Number one, the algorithms that DStretch, the plugin, uses to create these enhancements are very sophisticated. They use some fancy mathematics, and Java has the capability of doing this kind of mathematics, but the versions that Apple and Android, Google provide for their phones, they don't have the horsepower, and they don't have the subroutine libraries that I would need to do a full DStretch version. So they are pared down and simplified.
Is there a table or spreadsheet that has the enhancement name on one axis and what colors it works well on the other?
Well, I had that one slide that showed that. You can go back and look at the video, and there's a slide there that lists different colors and which enhancements I recommend to use for those colors.
Yeah, so a couple of weeks from now, when we have the video posted, come back and you can do a screen capture and you'll have your table.
Yeah.
All right.
Probably on the DStretch webpage too. If you look at the tutorials, I think.
Okay, so check the DStretch tutorials on the webpage. Okay, it's question. Do you suggest using a high quality JPEG or RAW file, and then once you've modified it with DStretch to save the image as a TIFF file?
I do it the other way. I start with a high quality TIFF, do the enhancement on it, and then I don't save the enhancements as a very high quality JPEG. I use a lower quality JPEG because I never do enhancements of enhancements. So I can use, say, I don't know, there are different numbering methods, but for a de-stretchable image, I use maybe 98 as the JPEG quality number. But when I save an enhanced image, I use 85. And so that cuts down a lot on the file size.
Okay, here's another question about petroglyphs. In recording older petroglyphs, you often have this problem of seeing the imagery due to the heavier repatination. I suspect I know the answer to this, but would DStretch help in this situation?
Sometimes if the patination is not completely uniform, if there's a little bit of a difference, if these things are totally repatinated and you cannot see a color difference, then I don't think DStretch will do much.
Right, so the key is that there's got to be some color difference to begin with. Have you ever used DStretch on fabrics or paper, like old maps, archival text, etc.?
Well, I do. I get, typically what happens is someone will tell me that they're successfully using it on parchments, for instance. What is the name of that technique in which they scrape off the surface of vellum so that they can reuse the page to write something else on, something that the monks used to do? A palimpsest, something like that is the word.
Yeah, something like that.
DStretch has
yeah.
been used to try and see what the original writing was.
And does it work?
It did work.
Wow. Another technical question. Does DStretch shift light frequencies, or is it doing something else?
No, light frequencies are captured by your camera and turned into colors, red, greens, and blues, which are then mixed together so that your eye sees, rather than a bunch of red, green, and blue dots, it sees an actual color. Okay, DStretch changes the colors. And of course, you're right, different colors have different wavelengths of light, but it's after the camera has already seen the original light and saved it to, a digital image.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to kind of add my own question in here to one that somebody posed. I've been doing some pictographs in Maine where the background surface in some cases has exfoliated, potentially before the pictographs were put there, and some places where it hadn't exfoliated. So the background color itself is different to begin with. And one of the things I was interested in trying was to see whether DStretch would help me decide whether it was the same paint that was used before and after exfoliation. And I found that the colors that would come out would be different depending upon the background.
Yeah, that's quite true. DStretch doesn't preserve the original colors. It makes a false color image, and the background can affect the color that DStretch shows for the pictograph.
Right. So we have to be real careful that the background is consistent if we think the colors are going to be diagnostic for the paint.
Yeah, there are some tools in DStretch I didn't mention, but there's something called color balancing. you can try and go in there and create sort of a standard color for the pictographs, and that can help to give the DStretch result more consistency.
How about other kinds of backgrounds like brick walls and stuff? Do you ever run into situations where things are just too busy for DStretch to work?
Well, yes, but if it's I don't know, a black painting on a brick wall, the DStretch will enhance it pretty well.
Can you use it to virtually remove graffiti? Like, one of your sites had some black graffiti over the original
Yeah.
pictographs. Is it possible to get rid of the black through DStretch?
Well, no, DStretch is not really suitable for that.
Okay. Let's see what else we've got here. Astrophotos. Have you tried using DStretch on astrophotos?
Oh, yeah. Excuse me. Take a drink here. Astronomers have used it for enhancing astrophotos. Now, they've also developed their own programs and ways of doing enhancement. So I don't think they use DStretch a lot anymore. But when DStretch was first available, the astronomers did use it.
Yeah. A couple of people commented that the word we were looking for was palimpsest. For the case where the monks reused
Right.
the
They
paper.
reused the vellum.
Right. And we actually use the same term like for Paleolithic rock art when you've got many animal images overlaid on top of
Right.
each other. So I think we've gotten more or less to the. Oh, okay. Here's one more question. Can DStretch work with iPhone LiDAR?
No. No, well, if you create an image with LiDAR, and that has colors in it, but I don't see how it would work.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the question, one more question is how to load raw files in DStretch.
You
No,
can't.
you can't do it.
What you need to do is if your camera is creating raw files, then generally, I'm thinking of Nikon or Canon or Sony, they will give you a software tool that can read those raw files and create a TIFF or a JPEG image from that. Image can read a whole bunch of different file formats, but it would be asking too much for Image to understand all the different manufacturers' raw files that are out there. Just too hard to do.
Yeah. Okay. Question here was DStretch available for computer? But I think you were demonstrating on a computer, correct?
Right. I have a PC.
So the answer is yes.
Yes.
And I guess this is a good one to end on. Any future ideas in the pipeline, or were there any ideas that you tried and didn't pan out?
Oh, there are tons of ideas that I tried. You can find them on the expert page. Do I have new ideas? Well, when I get new ideas, I put them into the program, but I'm depending now on my users to give me some good ideas for some new features that I should add to DStretch. So
Okay,
the answer is I'm waiting for your input.
Okay, you're in trouble now because we had a lot of we have a big audience here, I think, that might have some good ideas for you to try. So that's great. Again, thanks, Jon, for your presentation. It was fascinating learning about the technology and seeing how it worked on those Bolivian images. Thanks
Great.
again to all the attendees for your interest. And again, if you'd like to learn more about ARARA, please do check out our website and Facebook pages. And if you're so inclined, it's a good time now to renew or join our membership. Our next event will be on March 12th with photographer Dave Manley in the rock art of the Greater Four Corners region. So until then, good evening and stay safe.
Great.
Thanks, John.